Okay, hello everyone. This is Master Viktor Neustroev. Let's start our workshop. Today, the topic of the workshop is seizing strong squares. Let me explain what it means. However, I think that we should wait for more students, so they are joining, and let's for a couple of minutes. Let's just discuss. If you have any questions. Those of you who joined our workshop for the first time, I can tell you a little bit about how we do such workshops. So our workshop are kind of group classes, and every workshop is devoted to a certain specific topic. For example, today we are going to talk about strong squares and how to occupy it, and how these how occupation of these squares allows us to improve our position and play for a win. During the game, I'm going to explain and from time to time ask you certain questions, so you can either type it in the chat, type your answer in the chat, or unmute yourself and just pronounce what you want to say. If you have a certain question, that's okay. Again, you can just write down your question in the chat, or wait for a pause in my explanation and ask me using your voice. Okay, fine. I think we can start. First of all, what strong squares are? How do you understand it? Oh, actually, continue. No, these are central squares, but I'm asking about strong squares. What does it mean? A strong square can be a square, can be almost any square, but usually a certain square that is in the enemy camp. So located in the enemy territory. So usually on these three files, but very often it's the 5th or the 6th rank. Okay, so John, I think, has the best explanation. A square where the pieces are well placed. That's right. So it's basically about our pieces. So we can say that a strong square is such a square on the board where which at the same time cannot be attacked by the enemy pawns. For example, if you can locate a piece on that square, but this piece can be chased away with the enemy pawn move, for example, like it is e5 in this position, then we cannot say that e5 is a strong square. We can say that e5 is a strong square only temporary. What else? Occupying such a square improves the position of that piece that occupies it. For example, well, e5 is a temporary strong square, so the knight here has more opportunities. Occupying a strong square improves your ability to maneuver, and at the same time restricts enemy pieces maneuvering. Very often such a square is located close to the enemy king, always in the enemy camp, and sometimes close to the king, and or in the central files, I mean. Okay, so what do you think in this position? Which of the squares into the enemy camp we can make a strong square, and which piece we may occupy it with? Okay, so thanks. Dan made a suggestion. Let's wait for other people. Okay, how to realize it? Yeah, fine. It's d6. It's d6, and that should be occupied with a knight. How do I understand that it's d6 and it should be occupied with the knight? Because d6 is a square that cannot be attacked with the enemy pawn and is indirectly protected with our rook. So by pushing the pawn to c5, we can set our knight on d6, and this is exactly what happened in the game. And because of the knight on d6, white significantly improved their position. So what they should do, white should try to quickly develop their pieces like that. Then we can do it still, but we can do it later. So for now, maybe h4, h5, and so on, and then knight c4, knight d6. But in the game they played f6, they chased our knight away, so we had to react knight c4, and then they continued with e5, hoping to improve the bishop. However, this move already allows us to occupy this important square. And after we place our knight on d6, we definitely see that the position of the knight is improved, and because of that knight, we got new opportunities. Well, the rook is hanging, so the rook moves. Okay, so Emon, can you please, yeah, stop drawing, please. So now, what opportunities do we get? The rook moved. First, we have the control over this diagonal, so we can play bishop c4 at a certain moment. Why not? But what else? The knight also restricts enemy pieces' movements, such as a rook. The rook cannot stay neither here nor there, so they have to take care about this pawn. If they try to play something like that, I don't believe it works. Maybe just bishop e4 or queen e4. No, we can discuss it. So what do you think? How white should continue? Having the knight on d6 is definitely a huge benefit of the white's position. Okay, John suggested f4, but then we have to calculate bishop g4 move. Right, we should. So anybody else? David, for example, what do you think? How white should continue in this position? What would you play? f4 too. Yeah, this is a sound move for sure. Then what about you? Well, possible, but in my opinion, too slow. Yeah, they can improve their bishop, for example. So let's do f4. Well, the other way you can try is bishop c4 actually, but bishop c4 doesn't lead to a significant advantage. Let's say queen b3. Well, queen c5 is a mistake, right? Because you can play this move, attacking the rook. So if they take on c4, you take on e7. With a check, and then maybe even queen e3 protecting it. But if the rook goes back, then if the rook goes back, then just queen b7, threatening g7. How to defend? Because blocking doesn't work. Capturing is illegal. So probably taking on c4 is the best move, but taking on c4 means knight e7. So where does the king move? If king h8, at least queen e3 is fine, but I also like queen c3, for example. So king f7 maybe is a better move. Then queen b7, just attacking the rook. So if they take our knight, we take the rook. And if they save their rook, then we make a knight move with a tempo like knight f5 with queen g7 and so on. So that could be a possibility. And actually black has to react with king h8, and then it can be a f4 played, similar. But let's talk about f4 right away. So John first didn't like it because of bishop g4 move. I don't see how it works. So let's say rook d2. What helpful is behind this move? Yeah, there is also bishop c4 move. There is also bishop c4. Bishop c4, king goes to h8. Well, why king h8? Because if this move it's f5, for example. Bishop takes rook. Fine, I take here, and there is a pin. So that's why king h8. And Zamfir, what do you want to continue with in this position? Still rook d2. Well, yes, you can do so. Yeah, rook d2 for sure. It works. Fine, let's continue. So in the game, it was bishop d7 played. Now, well, I really liked bishop c4. Bishop e6, queen goes to b3. And now I think we can just take the pawn by doing this. So why does it work? Bishop c4 is a discovered attack, but finally there is a check on f7, and after this check we don't trade. I mean, we don't win a rook, we checkmate. So they have to sacrifice their queen on f7. Otherwise, it's just checkmate on g8. So bishop c4 was a better way, but white continued with f5. Who can tell me what's the purpose of f5? Does this move prepare bishop c4, but bishop c4, king h8? Ah, then you can play knight f7. Yes, but if they play bishop c6, then bishop c4 still is a good move, but you don't win material. It locks the bishop on the one hand, and f5 allows us to do what? Yes, not exactly to control the center, but to make the center stable, in order to then start a kingside pawn march, like Zamfir, for example, suggested g4, g5. Mark suggested queen h3, which I think is, well, I don't really see the point. G4, g5 looks much stronger, because with queen h3, what do you attack? h7, no. Yeah, locks the knight. Good point. Yes, also locks the knight. So it's a multifunctional move. Controls e6, controls g6, and allows a pawn march. Fine. So bishop c6 was played. Bishop c4 check was included. And after that, there was a pawn march. So this knight on d6 plays a very important role. It's impossible to drive the knight away from there. And it attacks the whole complex of squares, which are crucial for the positions, for these positions, such as, well, especially these two, restricting the rook mobility. And the knight threatens a very unpleasant jump on f7 at a certain moment of the game. Moreover, white now, because of the inability of the king to, well, the king is like on the edge of the board, and white can start the attack because white king is safe. But what about b6? Okay, let's discuss b6 move. This is exactly what was played in the game. What do you think white should continue? So Dan suggested before, then don't you think you expose your king too much with b4? B takes, rook b8. I don't know, queen a5, let's say then. So I think it does make sense to sacrifice the pawn on c5. It's already protected with the knight, so it's fine. Instead, you can create a danger. Ah, is the king safe on a1? Okay, so first of all, I am definitely against b4 move. If there were no queens on the board, I would say yes, it's possible. But with the queens on the board, I'm sure it's too risky. So checks, King a1, okay, queen a5. I don't really see what the queen does, but it's definitely a helpful move to threaten this, to threaten checkmate on c3, because white needs their queen to be in on the king side to succeed with the attack. But how they can perform it now? Maybe they can play knight f7, and then I have to sacrifice exchange. Maybe h4 g5, but it seems slow. So let's say queen. No, queen there doesn't work. So knight d7. I want to take on c5. Well, still looks winning, but white has to keep an eye on b2 and c3 squares then. Instead, it's better just to let black take on c5. So we can play g5, and if they take on c5, we take on f6. G takes f6, rook g1, threatening mate. How to play to avoid this? Knight d7. Okay, what would you continue in this position for white? Queen h6 was suggested by John. Any other suggestions? Doubling, it's slower, and once you double, they have no time to take, because they have no time to take the knight on g6, on d6, sorry, because rook g8 leads to checkmate. Okay, possible, but looks very slow. B takes c5 is a mistake according to Zamfir. Okay, I think it's queen h6. Well, you can already win exchange if you want, but it will be better if you play queen h6 first and then play knight f7, because with queen h6 you also threaten queen f6 in case if they want to move the knight and protect the f7 square with their queen. Then queen f6, and it's a game over. So knight f7. Well, they can sacrifice the queen here, but if they move the king, it's checkmate. What else? Yes, it's actually hard to suggest a move, because knight f7 is the next move, after which rook f7 and bishop f7, and there is no way to defend g7. There was also queen g3. Nice, actually, I didn't think about it. Threatens checkmate there. So how do I have to play? Queen b8. Yeah, queen b8, and then you still have knight f7, which allows you to win exchange. Yeah, so it's a total crush. Right. So maybe b takes c5 was a mistake. And yes, I agree. That move wasn't played in the game. The game continued with f takes g5. But queen takes g5. So they played h6. But let's say they take on c5 this time. What can you say about this position, and how would you continue? It's definitely winning, but how exactly to win? Okay, yes, it's obvious. It's f6. f6. So what to play? Well, g takes f6 is a disaster. Knight f7 at least. King moves. What would you suggest? Well, on the one hand, rook g1, but they can block with a knight. Maybe you have a better suggestion. Knight h6, king h8. Can you please repeat it again? Knight h6, king h8, and then knight. There is another suggestion, knight e5, but yeah, but knight e5, king h8. How does it work? Winning the bishop. Knight h6, knight a5. Come on, guys. There is checkmate. It's knight d8 just. So there is nothing that can stop it. What? No, the bishop cannot block the knight. It doesn't make sense. A queen block, but this is a queen loss. So just this move and then queen f8. Fine. Let's go back. B takes. Oh, maybe they can avoid a capture. Maybe they can avoid a capture and maybe play knight e6 in this position. What would you continue then? It's definitely winning, but let's do our best. F takes g7, rook g7. Bishop takes knight. And then? No, it's not. There is a queen guarding it. Well, I think you can take on e5 right away, and it's better because you create more threats. And even this, in case if the queen is not protected. So queen e5 right away is better because the rook is hanging. How to make a move? Taking is always a disaster. So for example, what? Rook g7, the knight is just lost. Knight g7. Then you can do what? You can just take on e7. I think this is probably the best way. So queen e5 immediately is a good move. Fine. So that's why the game continued with h6. So they don't even have time to take on c5. Queen h5 threatens with f6 and with knight f7. Well, I think that black is already lost, so they took on c5 and they got knight f7. Well, the king decided to not fall under a discovered attack. It's completely losing. Well, king g8, knight h6, and there is a quick checkmate like that. King h7, knight g5, king goes that way, and let's decide how to continue. David, if there is anything that you don't understand, don't hesitate to ask your questions. If you want me to go over this or that line, just suggest it. Okay, so yes, the answer here is just f6 because our knight is not hanging, so just f6, ruining the position, take, and it's game over. So knight h7. In order to take on f6, you should take on h7 first. They can block with a queen, but if so, they lose their bishop, and you have extra piece. If they do it with a rook, after rook e5, it's just a winning position. Rook h5 is a mating threat. There is nothing they can do to stop it. Well, for example, this move, maybe queen f6, and you take it. Otherwise, it's rook h5. Fine. So what did happen in the game? Let me rewind back and explain it from the very beginning, but this time quickly for those of you who joined us recently. So first of all, we are talking about strong squares. What are strong squares? These are squares in the enemy territory which cannot be protected with pawns and occupying which we can improve the position of our pieces and improve our position in general. In this exact position, e5 can be such a square, but only temporary until they play f6. However, another square that we can occupy is d6. By playing c5 and by transferring the knight to d6, we significantly improve the position of our knight and restricted the enemy piece's mobility, especially the rook. After that, we continued with f4, so the e pawn is pinned, and then, after they tried to finish their problem with development, we decided to close the position to make the center more stable, to initiate a pawn march on the enemy king. And this pawn march, even if we sacrifice the pawn on c5, leads to weakens the enemy king's position. Now the king can be totally exposed once we push f6. They played h6, but it didn't save the game. After knight f7 and this move, we finally played f6. The pawn cover over the king was ruined. The king now is absolutely weak, so we take on f6 and bring the rook to the game to deliver checkmate. All that was possible mainly because these two things, because of the knight on d6 supported by the pawn and the rook indirectly, and because we closed the position with f5 and did a pawn march, while our opponent didn't have any active counterplay. Fine, let's continue with our next example. The game between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov. Garry was playing with black pieces. So what I ask you in this position, well, it's already a complex middle game. White is a pawn up. But black pieces are better placed. These knights are not very well placed. This is a classic game, that's right. So what do you think black should do? How black can paralyze enemy pieces? H6. Okay, the idea of H6 is probably to do what? I think it's a good move and you can play it, but let's say H6, bishop H4. Then what? Queen D6 on the one hand, but bishop G3. So, and G5 seems to be too risky. Maybe when there is a sacrifice. I don't see how it works, but you should calculate it. Maybe it doesn't work. Okay, fine. So, well, H6 is a helpful move for sure. Maybe you mean maybe you think there is knight e4, but knight e4 doesn't work well because after knight takes e4 there is a bishop hanging. So the concept here is that you can take on h4, but you lose on c5. Yeah, the move that was played in the game was knight d3. The d3 square is a strong square, occupying which we improve the knight and obtain new opportunities. For example, b4. That's the reason why Anatoly Karpov decided to move his knight to b1. Now h6 was played. Bishop h4. So let's decide how to continue. g5, just bishop g3. I don't want to expose the king too early. Maybe this move can be played, but for now I don't see a purpose. So knight d3, yes, you improve the knight. What I like about this knight, that both these squares are under your control, so it restricts the mobility of the enemy rooks. They no longer can fight for the open file. Yeah, so knight e4, the queen attacks bishop. I mean, if bishop takes queen, then it's knight d2, so knight d2, rook d1. But the problem is, again, that they are very likely to take on c5. And this is, I would better avoid. So, because what black is still a pawn down and you brought the knight back, so you'd better keep it on d3. That's why let's suggest something else. Rook c8 is a helpful move for sure. Maybe white wants to play d6 actually. Queen b6 attacking f2, but well, it's protected many times. I don't think you can win because of that. And queen b6, playing queen b6 makes b4 impossible because knight a4 is definitely unpleasant for us. But queen b6 removes the pin on the one hand. Well, the game continued with b4, and this is definitely a better move in terms of fighting for the center. After knight a4, well, I don't know if you want to suggest this move, maybe. Okay, so as for queen b6, there is d6 continuation. That's true. It's a bit unpleasant. And bishop f6, pawn takes, queen takes. Yeah, that's right. d6 is something that we'd better avoid. So the game continued with b4. What about knight e2? The knight went to a4 with a tempo, but if, let's say, knight e2 move, maybe this time we can play queen b6. Because if d6 is played in this position, this, and after bishop f6, because there is no queen, maybe just knight f2 works. Or bishop f2. Yeah, maybe bishop f2. And then this move, just bishop f2, king h1, rook takes d6. After the bishop moves, we can create a discovered attack. Which discovered attack? So let's say, where does the bishop move? Oh, the bishop is trapped. But even if the bishop could have a safe square, let's say he moves, then bishop e3 and knight f2 is a problem. Yeah, okay, fine. So knight e2 doesn't work. Knight a4 was played. Bishop goes to d6. White decided to trade bishops with bishop g3, which is fine. So let's decide how to continue. So queen a5 attacking the knight, but then b3. So what did we achieve with such a trade? Well, it's definitely a possible scenario, but well, I think that it's also good when they take and you have a queen on d6, so that you can play on both sides. So that's why maybe let's wait until they take. Yeah, so John is absolutely correct. Rook c8 just to mobilize, because if they cannot fight for the files, why not to occupy them? That definitely restricts enemy pieces' mobility. b3 was played. Okay, so you got the files, the c, the e, you are still down a pawn. How to progress? Yeah, so okay, so John today is playing like Gary Kasparov. It was g5 played. Wow. Fine. So let me see. What is the other suggestion? 95. Wait a sec. Zamfir, why 95? I thought that you really enjoy having the knight on d3. They definitely take. You have to take. Otherwise, they do intermediate move, so you have to take. Then, yes, I see that you have the control over the c2 square, but is c2 as important as the knight on d3? Yeah, so rook c2 is definitely a candidate move here, but okay, queen b4. Okay, no, after queen b4, rook c2 doesn't look good. Maybe you have to take with a rook then. With a rook, it's stronger. But let's say what? Can rook e1 be played? So you still do rook c2, queen d4 just. Yes, you can take the pawn, but well, this is vulnerable. Knight c5 is coming. That's why I would prefer to keep the knight there, because the knight there cannot be attacked. So how they can attack it? So let's play like g5, for example. Can they attack it with bishop e2? What's your opinion? Yeah, that's right. Then you can play knight e4, but knight e4, then queen d3. So let's play accurately. Knight g3, a discovered attack. That's right. And then you take this knight for this bishop on e2 for free. That's absolutely right. Can you visualize it? Queen d3, it's knight g3. And then the queen is hanging, and once the queen moves, you can take on e2. Bishop f4. In which scenario bishop f4? By the end of the line, yes. But bishop f4 after bishop e2, probably not, because they just take it. Okay, so yes, bishop e2, knight e4. Queen takes, knight g3. If they take with the queen, you take there. If they just move the queen, you take here. And just, well, bishop g6. So you are a piece up. Fine. So the game here continued with bishop d6, but I also wonder what's your opinion regarding knight b2, because the knight on a4 is definitely doing nothing, and with knight b2 we can trade, white can trade knights, and this knight on d3 is so annoying. So what would you suggest? Trade the knights, because retreating with the knight to c5, well, still playable, but okay, let's say we trade, queen takes, knight f4. Okay, let's go back to f4 then. So they take, we take, queen d4, bishop f5, queen d2, rook c2. Okay, works, yes. So the knight is poisoned. Let me show you this line. The queen has just a few squares, so queen d4, but then bishop f5. And now the queen has to protect this knight, so the queen has to retreat there. But if the queen retreats there, it's rook c2. Let's think about the response to knight f. Knight c4 is a good response. Maybe knight c4. So knight c4, you want to continue with knight e4, but there is a bishop here. Let's see what else you can do. Take. Yeah, knight c4 looks very strong. I don't know how to deal for black in this position. So this, knight e4, take this, knight d6, queen d6, and playing this position. Then you can at some point win the pawn on d5. Not now. Maybe you should first start with rook c2 because queen d4 then means this. Actually, if rook c2 in this position, they take on b4 just. No, that doesn't work for us. So we should take on d6 first. Yeah, so that means that we probably need to take. But then the idea is that we can play which move? Which move to play in this position to win material? Bishop e5. Well, bishop e5, bishop takes bishop. There is a bishop on g3. So g4, right? G4. Why g4? Because the bishop can only move there, but if the bishop moves there, it's rook c2. And if bishop h4, for example, sacrificing this but winning that, it's bishop e5. And white loses a piece anyway. And if bishop e2, it's rook c2. So that's why it's really hard to suggest a good move for white. They took queen takes g3. Oh, black is still a pawn down, but their pieces are better. How to progress? Maybe knight b2 is coming, actually. Knight e5, bishop g2. Then you want to play, okay, so knight e5, bishop g2. Oops, bishop g2. Then you wanted to continue with this move, but then queen d4. So you can win a pawn there, but I'm sure you can get more advantage from this position. So this is that's why Gary decides to play knight d7. So if it's needed, he can just replace one knight with the other knight. Bishop g2. Queen f6, taking the line under the control. So there is no knight b2 anymore. They tried this move, but a5. So take, take. Now the queen goes to e2 to escape. Bishop here. Who knows what's the purpose of this move? Bishop g6. Can you guess why black in this position plays bishop g6? Yes, trying to take advantage of the f3. So g4 and knight e5, and then you get the control over this square. This is exactly what happened in the game. So queen d2 back. The pawn is hanging, so king g7. f3 was played. If not f3, then knight e5 is the next move. I actually think that maybe this knight. Just don't blunder this. So f3. Queen d6 simply. F takes g4 and queen d4 check. King h1. How to continue in this position? Black is definitely winning, but knight f2 fails. Rook f2 just. These knights are out of the place of action, and very unlikely they are going to join the place of action in the nearest future. So what's your opinion? How black here can continue the attack? Oh, just take on g4 with a queen. What else? Bring the other knight to e5. I think bringing the other knight to e5 makes more sense. Because then you can take on g4 with a knight. Gary played this move to do the same, because together with g4, he has e4. Because knight e4, knight f2, and bishop takes, and the king is too vulnerable. So, but I think knight e5 is good too. Maybe h3 defending it. Then it's a bit unclear how to continue. Well, queen g4 right away is interesting too, but is it 100% winning position? Well, rook e2 is a threat. And then bishop e4 also. Rook d3. In which moment rook d3? You mean rook e3? What's the purpose of rook e3? Yeah, just a better position. Yeah, but knight f6 is several times stronger because there is also knight e4, knight f2 threat. Because even if queen d3, knight f2 is a discovered attack on that queen on d3. This is I think what happened in the game. Knight e4, queen d3, but knight f2. Knight f2, this is a check, a discovered attack too. So if king g1, let's say, then how exactly you win? But they take your queen. Yes, but it's a check by the queen and they take your queen. You take this rook, they take your queen with a check. Yeah, okay. Yeah, knight h3, we will continue. David, which other line you wanted to go over? Right, but here he can do maybe this move first. You take it and then he takes it. Ah, no, the rook is hanging. Okay, no, then you're probably right. So this, then you take his queen with your knight. Let's compare material. Black has extra exchange, but f5 is a problem. f5, it's a double attack on two pieces. So, okay, so knight h3 move. Let's talk about knight h3 move now. King h1, so I think it's not a moderate mate, because if you do it, you still don't have access to f2. Okay, so queen cross queen. Yeah, queen takes queen, but look, John suggested this nice move. So what then? The rook has to take, and if so, queen takes queen. I think it works too, but okay, let's say queen takes queen, I think is more simple. Rook takes, and then there is... Yeah, but there is a better scenario, I think. Let me find it. Uh-huh. Yeah, but I wanted this. So take, check, and the checkmate. Like that. Well, maybe after rook e1, you can block with a bishop. Who cares? It's still... no, yeah, it works. No, it doesn't. Okay, no. Take here. Yeah, that's right. Maybe there is... Maybe this is the... Yes, but I'm looking for checkmate. Okay, yes, this wins material. Yeah, this wins material. But then they can play rook f3 move, and I don't take this one. So I prefer this one because it reinforces the pin. And if this move, just that. Yeah, so queen takes queen is the solution then. Knight h3 and queen takes queen. Because something like that is a mistake. Okay, nice. So that's why they have to take on f2. They cannot move the king. They have to take on f2, but if so, they just lose their bishop. And this is exactly what I suggested in the previous variation when we discussed it. Then this, so they are potentially threatened to take, but it still fails. So rook d3. And then bishop f1. So queen a1, rook a1. Rook a1 check, bishop f1, rook takes, king g2. You take the knight. But you have only 3 pawns, so you have extra exchange, but 3 pawns left. It's a winning position, but very hard to win. Maybe there is a more simple solution here. No, queen e1, well, I don't like it. Then what? Rook c2? When rook c2? If rook f1, king g2, the rook is hanging. Well, there is another interesting line, but again, I don't think it works. It's this, because Brian wanted to probably do something like that to take, but king g1 just, and I didn't find a solution. Also, knight d2 works. So let me rewind how to play. And then I want to go back to John's variation with rook a1 instead of knight h3. Because maybe we didn't analyze it to the very end. Okay, so how to win? Let's calculate material. It's queen versus 3 minor pieces and the pawn. So if we just look at the material, we can say white is better, but no, black is completely winning. However, we have to find the proper move. The back rank is weak, that's right. So how you exploit it? Like that. Okay, but the problem of this move is that they take on d8, not on e3. But yes, you can take, and this is checkmate. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, yeah, rook d8 should work. In the game, it was a similar move. It was rook c1 attacking this rook. So, okay, and John said queen f2 here. Maybe it works too, but rook c1 is a more simple way to win. So what they can do, if they take there, we take here. They block. Now let's take there. So we have 2 extra exchanges. Take there, then we also take the pawn. The game continued with knight b2 and then queen f2. So our rook is not hanging. It's checkmate. Knight d2 was played, still completely losing. If we take, then we can continue with rook e1, and knight f1 doesn't help. Knight f1, rook f1, and this is checkmate. So this is what happened in the game. After rook e1, Anatoly Karpov resigned. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, so the main problem was discoordination of these 2 knights. Let's go back. Yeah, but they can try to get them into the game. If, let's say, the knight goes to e4. Rook d8. 94. 94 doesn't work. 94 rook d3. 95. Yeah, it fails. Yeah, it is a problem. Okay, so but queen f2 is better than queen g5. Here the queen is more active and there is a threat of this or the threat of rook e2. Okay, let's go back to that scenario. So knight f2, king there, and rook e1, rook takes e1. John, why is it better? Queen d3 now, but they can take here. No, I don't think it's better. No, rook c2, okay, rook c2, I move back and then, so you cannot attack it. No, it's not better. No, it's better to play knight h3 and then just take on d3 with the queen and then the delivery check there and so on. Fine. Okay, so let's do a quick summary of this game. So that was the game between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov. Garry was playing with black pieces. He was a pawn down, but with his knight, he could occupy this strong square. At the same time threatening with a fork, so white had to defend their position. h6 was played, and b4, driving the knights to a really bad positions. So these two knights were discoordinated for the whole game, and that was the main problem. Also, this knight on d3 restricted the enemy rook's mobility, which allowed black to get the control over these two files. What then? White tried to bring pieces back like that, but black started an attack on the king side, restricting pieces because white doesn't have space, and mainly it's because the knight is here. So bishop d6, queen d6, g3 was played. However, just knight d7 if we want to replace our knight on d3 in case if they play knight b2 and take the knight on d3. Bishop g2 was played, queen f6, controlling this diagonal. There is no knight b2 anymore, and then bishop g6, trying to set the knight on f3. Karpov noticed it, and it didn't really happen in the game because after g4, well, queen d2, h6 is hanging, so they played f3, so there was no way to occupy this square and set the knight there, for example. But black continued with queen d6, f takes g4, and finally that exposed the king's position, which black took advantage of. So king h1, the knight goes here or there, and the game ended quickly. The queen was lost. It seems there was a sufficient compensation, but after rook c1, the weakness of the back rank decided the game. Like that. Queen f1 mate. Let's now go back to the moment where f3 was played. So what was the question? Whether it was a possibility to somehow control the square? Well, how? I don't... Not playing f3? No. How? With knight d2? So in this position like that? I don't think it works. First of all, there is rook e2. Second, there is knight e5. So no, I don't believe in it. So this, let's say. Knight e4, rook e4. Oh, maybe it doesn't work so well. Okay, no, knight e4, just take here. And they win a piece. No, I don't think it's a good idea. Fine. Okay, let's continue with our third game. Okay, look at this position. It seems it was either King's Indian or Old Benoni. The H pawns were exchanged. It's white to move. Maybe you can figure out if there can be any strong squares that you can occupy with your pieces. With which piece h5, for example, can be occupied? You need to specify how exactly, because I don't see how to bring the knight to h5. So through g3, but the knight getting to g3 is also a tough procedure. Okay, so John suggested knight h2, knight g4. Okay, but g4 isn't your territory, and you don't really, well, you control these squares, but they can play knight f6, and what, you have to trade then? Brian's... Okay, but yeah, it can be a 5, but please suggest a plan. Brian says a knight on d6, so one knight goes there, supported by the other knight. Well, Brian, there should be a plan. So I like your idea, but you should provide me with a plan of how to achieve it. Can you repeat again, please? Knight, what? E3. Uh-huh. 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 But once you do it, they always take. Is it a problem or not? Yeah, but this is a close position, and most of your pawns are located on light squares. So having the light squared bishop is not a privilege then. Oh. Yeah, well, ideally, yes, but in this case, the h pawns are exchanged already. So if, for example, white decides to do this plan, which is common for king's Indian, like this and e5, well, what's gonna happen? It will be b6, and because of the absence of the h pawn, the black's attack can be stronger. Yeah, so and in this position, yeah, you'd better keep some flexibility in mind. It's not always a king side, a queen side attack for white. You okay? Okay, so what I also see in my students' games is that, okay, so, well, let's say there is a certain opening and there are typical plans. Well, one of my students, he doesn't attend our workshops, but what he does, he always sets pieces regardless of how his opponent plays. Well, in many of his openings it works because he starts the game with c4 and the position is closed, and such a strategy isn't bad. But well, he tries to stick to one certain setup. What I ask him to do is to adjust his plan based on how his opponent sets his pieces, because if their opponent creates a weakness, instead of doing this plan that maybe works or not, let's find a better move and already take advantage of the weakness that your opponent, for example, formed. So knight h2 f4 is suggested here. No, okay, well, fine, knight h2 was played, that's right, but why? Not because the knight goes there, not because of f4, because before here with such a king looks very suspicious. Also, f4 opens his bishop and allows the enemy knight to go to e5, which would be a problem for us. So, no, f4 is too risky. Opening our king, well, if the king was on the other side and, for example, we had the rook there, I would say, yeah, for sure, let's push f4. But this time with the king there, I see that the enemy king becomes weak too, but in King's Indian, the black king is supported with pieces. Okay, so John, you are very close to the solution. John said that white needs to find a way to dominate the light squares. That's right. So you need to occupy this square, f5, with your knight. But the problem is that once your knight goes there, there is always a bishop that can take. And that's why in this game, who was Gideon Stalberg, he played bishop e2 and bishop g4 to trade bishops off. That was the key idea. And after that, the f5 square becomes weak. So just a little more imagination, and such plans will be obvious for you in your games too. I know it's tempo-consuming procedure, but this is a close position, and there is no immediate punishment. And knight h2 is a very flexible move that stops g4. Well, it doesn't stop f5, but if you look at the f5 move, so pawn takes, bishop takes, bishop d3. Well, I don't think that they should move the bishop back. They have to trade. And then you can play knight e4. And with such a position being open in the center and the very nice blockade of the knight, there is no attack on the king side, and this pawn becomes vulnerable. So this time we don't occupy f5, but this time we improved our position a lot. That's why f5 doesn't really help black. There will be no kingside attack if they trade the pawns. Anyway, so bishop g4, knight d7, knight f3 back. Well, we are not attacking there. Well, knight f1 is possible too. Knight f1, knight e3, knight f5. But they play knight f3. I will explain the concept. Oh, well, maybe it wasn't the best move actually. So I analyzed it with the engine. That was king g2 was the best move. Then knight f1, knight a3, knight f5, rook h1, and so on. That would not only help white to defend their king's position, but would potentially create an attack on the enemy pieces. The queen is very uncomfortable, so the queen feels uncomfortable on h6. The game continued with knight f3. They played knight b6 to attack on c4, bishop c8, rook takes. Why this rook, I don't know. If I were playing, I would take with this rook. And then what do you think white should play here? So all suggestions are welcome. The e3, the f5 square is even weaker, but c4 is hanging and our knight is already on f3, so we cannot do this. David, can you please specify what you mean? Okay, so John suggested king g2, rook h1. Zamfir suggested that. King g2, g4, knight e2. Okay, fine. You make a 4 weak, but maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah, king g2, g4 sounds like a plan. The only problem of this plan is that the pawn on g4 can be a weakness. However, because you're always attacking g5, it shouldn't be an issue. So this move for sure, and if knight f6, you just take on g5. Right, right. Yes, I think it's a possible plan. I like it. b3 to protect it. Fine. Queen b3. Queen b3 was played in the game to cover c4. So it's not a bad move, but at the same time, not the very best. Okay, let's continue. Let's continue with what happened in the game. Queen b3, bishop f6. Now your turn. Well, guys, please don't don't change the plan. Actually, just this Friday, when we were doing a group class, I was explaining then that it's okay if you change your plan several times during the game, and we discussed when to change your plan. But if in this position you're absolutely focused on the control of the f5 square, why you this time decide to change your plan? Well, Well, I'm not saying a4 is bad, for example. No, it's fine. But this square is crucial. King g2 is a good move too. Rook h1 can be played then, right? But there is a certain move that is better than others. So would you like your knight on f5? For sure, yes. How can you bring the knight to f5? This. The second way is this, that. Maybe through g4, right? Of course, knight h4 directly. So that's why they brought the knight to f3, not to f1 in that position. So here, they played knight f3 because they understood that the knight can go there. So if, let's say, queen g6 here to try to avoid such a problem, I think king g2 would work. And rook here. But maybe before that, let's play bishop f5. What do you think? So bishop f5, queen f6. So I just win a pawn. So what we are talking about? I don't think so. We have to take now then. Yeah, well, actually we can take now. So let's say a check. I don't really see the purpose of this check, but okay. And then bishop takes. Oh, knight takes. No, let's say bishop takes. Queen g6, queen d2. Oops, not queen d2. Yeah, queen d2, but then bishop g4. This is what I prefer to avoid. Maybe I played rook h1 by mistake. So let's do this move and then queen h5. If queen h6, it's queen f7. And if knight c4, I think it's still a winning position. So b3, knight moves, check, and maybe this is the move. Queen g6 could be a defense. But in this position, if so, I can just trade and play with an extra pawn. It should be winning. So that's why I played knight c4. But now queen g6 doesn't work because the knight is hanging. So the knight has to move. And then I play queen h7 already. King moves, and in this position, I don't know how to play. To be honest, I don't know. Okay. Maybe knight b5. Oh, knight b5 works. So knight b5, and now a queen's trade means this, and this is also a threat. Well, rook h1, I don't see immediate win after rook h1. That's why I don't suggest it. But if I had a free move, I would play rook h1, yes. Okay, fine. So anyway, what you can at least do is take on f5. Yeah, take on h7 right away. Then take there with a knight. Then play queen here. And then play b3 once it's needed. That's it. It's the most simple way to get extra pawn and a winning position. So here, knight h4 should be played. I wanted to rewind to illustrate it, because the knight on f5 even costs a pawn. So king g2, rook c7, rook h1, and knight f5 is the next move, with a strong attack through the file. Okay, queen b3 was good too. The knight finally reached f5, bishop e7, king g2, rook c7, and knight b5. So you see here, Brian's idea may work. But first you needed to set your knight on f5, at least one knight, and then the other one can go to b5. So this move, how to play? So the whole army has to defend d6. Okay, so yeah, rook h1 or g3. You probably mean g4, but yeah, rook h1 is a more helpful move than g4, so let's play g4. Oh, rook h1, and then g4 with queen h3 idea. Yeah, that. Yeah. Then there is a king on g7 then. Okay, so yeah, this is what was played in the game. So, well, if any of you consider doing this move, knight a7, no, it doesn't deserve attention, because what for? Our knight is attacking knight. The enemy knight only puts pressure there, but our knight attacks both. And it cannot be chased away. Once the knight is chased away, then we take on d6 and then we take on b6. It guarantees a winning position. So that's why let's keep this knight. Because knight a7, knight c4, let's say. Queen c4, rook a7, and what's the purpose? It was just an exchange. So rook h1 was played. Then it was knight c8. Let's actually make the moves. Rook h1, knight c8, and yes, in this position queen f3 works, g4 works, but queen f3 is better. White played queen d1 with the same idea to reach h5. Bishop d8, and please guess the quickest way to a victory. King takes h7, then what? King g8. No, that's continue. The king goes back to g8. Well, it's the same. The king goes back. To bring the rook. Yeah, but if rook h7 works immediately, let's do rook h7 first. And yes, it works. It works, right? So this, queen h5, king g8, and bishop here. And now rook h1. How does it work? Well, definitely they cannot take, because after the king goes to the h file, it's game over. What else? f6. Fine. But f6, bishop h6. So the queen must move. This is the only square for the queen, after which queen g4, and there is checkmate. The next move is rook h1, then bishop f8, and that's the end. There is nothing they can do. Well, the king, no, let me show you. So in this position, you can already do this if you want, but let's start with rook h1. And then either bishop g7 or bishop f8. So, for example, this move, then bishop g7. And if rook g7, it's queen g7 mate. If the king moves, then this should be a quick checkmate. Queen. Okay. Queen e8. No, let's deliver a checkmate faster. I'm sure the one exists. No, king g6 then. But bishop f6. Yeah, so I started with this move. Yeah, knight h4, so king h5, then this, and f3. So king g5 is the other move. Oh, but then it's this, I think. King h5. So how do you play in this position? This. And this is a retreat with the bishop leads to checkmate. Oh, king g4, f3 always. Fine. Okay. Queen e8. Oh, queen e8, but they take there. Actually, queen e8, they take there. Queen g6 is made. Right. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Let's do a quick summary of this game. Okay, so the game between Gideon Stallberg against Robert Graham Wade. Well, it looks similar to King's Indian or Old Benoni defense. However, the h-pawns were exchanged and the g-pawn was advanced before the f-pawn, which made the f5 square potentially weak. White realized it and took advantage of that. Ideally, you should place your knight on f5, but you cannot because the bishop captures it. And then a bishop pair doesn't really help white in such a close position. That's why white decided to trade bishops first and played bishop a2. Well, of course, black could have a chance to do f5 and exchange, but again, after a trade of the bishops, white sets a very nice blockade on e4. Black no longer has a kingside attack, and white just continue reinforcing his position. So this is a weakness, as well as there can be a queenside play, like in a typical King's Indian defense. However, queen f6 was played, bishop e2, to be able to play bishop g4 and trade the enemy light square bishop. So queen h6, bishop g4. Well, they can trade, after which we can take with our knight and then play knight a3, knight f5, but they decided to not do it immediately, so knight d7. The knight goes to f3. That was a tricky move, because on the first glance it seems that knight should go to f1, then to e3, and then occupy f5. But knight f3. Knight b6. Already, okay, so the bishops were exchanged. Now the e-square becomes extremely weak, and already white could sacrifice the pawn on c4, but play knight h4, having taken advantage of the pin. However, first they decided to protect the pawn and did knight h4 a little later. So finally f5 was occupied and the position became technically weak, technically winning. Bishop e7, king g2. So the knight comes to attack on that side. Finally, all pieces are tied down to the defense of the d6, and white starts their kingside attack. He brings his rook, his queen, and finally does a very nice combination with rook h7, which lead to a completely winning position. After queen g4, black resigned because this rook comes, and then the bishop moves, and it's a quick checkmate, or at the very least, white wins the queen. Okay, fine. So when I do a summary, I kindly ask to not interrupt me, okay? So what is the question? At which moment? I don't think so. It's too valuable. So it's a pawn. Well, 94, let's say. So bishop f5, 5. So bishop d3. Well, Zamfir, what do you mean king h3 move? Bishop h3 maybe. Okay, knight f6, you lose there. No, this knight can move. Yes, knight g6 is fine. I think this is also a move. So knight g5, bishop takes. Right, but then I take here, you take, and then you don't have enough attack to capture it. You can try this move. So let's say I do king g2, then you take and they take there. So still seems losing. My next move is this. Or bishop g5 I can sacrifice here, but then play bishop f6. Knight e4? Knight e4 is a problem. No, it seems bishop e3 and it's winning. Okay, just knight g4 then. Rook f8? I think rook f2 is the idea, but maybe you're right. What do you mean? There is a rook. No, I think it's over. So there is no queen g3. Yeah, well, okay. So there is another line I wanted to play here. Knight h7 first. Knight h7, take, and then knight h7. So I still trade successfully. And finally, there is queen h5 move. So knight e4, knight f6, I mean, means trade. Yeah, bishop takes, then, yeah, then trade, and this move. Right, okay. Oh, okay, fine. So, no. Let's continue. We have last game to analyze. Karpov, Kasparov this time. This time, Karpov was white, playing with white, and he won. However, as usual, before we do the analysis of the last example, I want to remind you that these workshops are free. However, if you enjoy this content and you would like to support me, you can use this link and donate using this button. Let me share this link with you in the chat. So, and then I explain how it works. So you enter the amount you want to donate, can be any amount, then you click a PayPal button, it redirects you to enter your PayPal account. So you enter it and send your money automatically to my PayPal account. Fine. The second way is to use Wise. Just if you have a Wise account, just click on this link and it works. Then you should enter your account again, and this is how you can send money to me. That really helps me to plan my work, as well as to pay salary to my assistants who try to help me, who help me to prepare content. Fine. Let's continue with our last example. Well, this is a complex position. Who can recognize the opening from which it happened? Yes, thanks, Zamfir. It's Grunfeld defense. Okay, so black played rook e8. What they should do was knight c4, threatening a fork. And if bishop e7, then rook e8. Now the bishop is hanging and there is a fork. So why not knight b2? Because after queen d2, this knight is trapped. And after that, white has extra pawn. But if in this position rook e8 was played, the bishop goes back to a3 and covers the b2 square. But it means that knight takes bishop and rook e4, and the position black is not worse. Maybe it's equal, maybe black is a little better. But they didn't play so, they played rook e8. So Kasparov played rook e8, he didn't realize that his knight c4 move has a potential. Rook c1, queen b7. And this is where I ask you to think about your next step, your next move. I'm sure you can come up with this move instantly as a candidate move, but you can undervalue this move. Which I want you to visualize the whole potential of this move. Okay, Brian suggests queen a3. And what is the potential of queen a3 move? Can they play knight e4? Because e7 is not hanging even if the queen wasn't under attack. Because e7 is protected with two major pieces. Erush suggests a4. a4, knight c4. Erush, how does it work? And let me remind you that today we are talking about strong squares. A certain squares, ideally in the enemy camp, placing a piece there improves your position and restricts enemy pieces' mobility. Brian wanted the queen to c5. That makes a lot of difference. So queen a3, knight c4, queen c5. But they can play... they cannot play this move. But they can play bishop f8 and try to chase your queen away with the e-pawn push. So... because the queen on c5 later becomes the object of the attack. Okay, so Zamfir suggests to play d5. Okay, and by d5, Zamfir wants to let us know that c6 is such a square that is required for white to occupy. The game continued with knight c4, so d5 was absolutely right, and this is the square that we want. However, what then? If knight d4, bishop d4. John, thanks, but queen b1, e5, then the knight still goes to c4. Oh, well, this is definitely not a good position. You have a bishop, but what do you attack with this bishop? You can threaten checkmate, but just f6 and that's it. While this knight is a really strong knight. They can also consider doing e5. It doesn't work now, of course. D takes e6 and the rook cannot take. The back rank is too weak. Before that? No. White play d5. Okay, so knight d4 doesn't look so pleasant. What would you suggest here? And then what? Okay, so yeah, this is a good example of a bad bishop. The bishop is open, but the only thing he does is the control over the d4 square. To trade bishops, bishop e3. I don't think they take. Then you want to take like that. Okay, yeah, bishop e3 can be a candidate move. Yeah, I agree. Maybe they don't trade. Maybe they play bishop f8 and try to undermine with e6. Who knows? Anyway, so maybe rook c4 can be played. Oh, rook c4. No, well, no, I don't think rook c4 is playable. You provide, well, the position is too open. If you sacrifice the exchange in a close position and then focused on the attack, for example, then it would work. Here, there is, they can invade your camp. So there is no even a passed pawn for now. Karpov played knight d2. It's the very best move, even according to the engine. But you can ask me, how is it possible? We wanted this knight on c6. Well, we wanted any piece on c6, not obligatory the knight. Any piece there would make our position better. And we also get rid of the enemy knight on c4. Well, they could try to play something like h6, bishop f4, and bring the knight to a4, keeping the position more complicated. This is what actually Gary should do, but he decided to take. Bishop takes, and he did rook c8. So the next move is crucial. White to move, your turn. Yes, it's rook c6. Rook c6, and the rook becomes poisoned. So rook c6, d takes c6. If queen takes c6, it's queen d8 and bishop h6 with a winning position. Well, black is not forced to take this pawn. They can play queen c7 and cover such a square. But then queen d7. If queen takes queen, this pawn is a passed pawn. But what else to play? Maybe this move. But this is still a winning position for white. Just bishop b4, capturing on e7. King f8, still bishop e7. If queen takes queen and bishop c7, still bishop e7 wins the game. That's why the game continued with bishop e5. So they didn't take. However, now, for example, these bishops can be traded. Now, if this trade, rook c6, d takes c6, this is a passed pawn, and this passed pawn offer better chances for white to realize. I mean, this passed pawn can be promoted in the queen's game, especially if it's very close to the queen square. For example, this h4. So h4 allows this idea as well. Okay. Yeah, but they won't trade queens then. And then you don't have a passed pawn. So it's better to get the passed pawn at least. If they trade queens, you're winning, but they don't. Here, at least you have a passed pawn. So h4, in order to play like that, as well as to do this. So g3, f2, g3, h4 is the most solid for pawn formation in queens endgame, because what you need to avoid checks is just to keep your queen on this diagonal. Queen c5, and what then? So king f8, queen d5, e5. Now queen d7, you cannot play it. And what's the purpose of f4? Don't you weaken the king too much? Which pawns? No, here I take. So let's say king e7 in this position. No, well, this already provides black with drawish chances. So I think it's already a draw. Well, but black has to play accurately, of course. Okay, so let's talk about Brian's idea. There was a bishop h6 move instead of bishop c5. I don't fully understand in which position. Yes, but this is how they can trade queens and stop. So with bishop b4, you attack on e7. So on the next move you take and promote, but here you don't. So how to continue? So they can come closer. Let's say bishop g4. Okay, they have to push the f pawn, but then they still come closer and win your pawn. So the key idea of that bishop b4 move was to take on e7 so that it makes this queen trade completely losing for black, because now the bishop doesn't stop it. And even with bishop b4, the king cannot come closer, because then bishop takes with a check. Okay, fine. So no, well, queen c5 doesn't do much. King e8 just, king e6. So king e6, for example, what did you achieve with this move? No, it's still drawish. So h4 should be the plan here. h4, f6 to bring the king closer, because king f8 is a blunder. e6, it's not clear of what for. So f6, but queen b3, queen d5. King e8, queen g8 is made. So they have to push the pawn, but then it's queen e6, and there are problems. f6 is vulnerable. Then what? If the queen goes here, I actually don't know. Maybe it's time to play what? Queen c8 and take on a6, maybe. So it's gonna be losing position step by step. White provokes black to weaken their pawn structure, and maybe black loses another pawn. Oh, okay, not another pawn, just one pawn. So what else we need to talk about? There was someone suggestions, but I forgot to cover it. Okay, there was another suggestion. So let's say, no, this is what happened in the game. Let's say bishop c3, queen c3, rook c6, queen c6, queen e7, e5. Creating a pass pawn. Okay, queen d4. d6, no. Queen a1, queen a5. These are checks, and then I take on d6 with my queen. So d6, no. So queen d4 and queen mobility allows to draw the game. But then queen d5. You want to take on a6? You take on a6, I take on a5. More we simplify, closer a draw is. Okay, let's continue with what happened in the game. So because of that and this coming, they decided to not trade queens. They played bishop d8. Then queen d4. Well, of course, Kasparov saw that threat. He prepared f6 move. Let's decide what white should continue here. Again, the pawn on capturing on c6 is very likely to be poisoned in case if you then in the end have queen d8 and queen captures b8. But you also have your bishop vulnerable then. Yeah, queen c5 looks interesting. So how do they have to play? Rook c6, queen c5, just rook e8. Yeah, this is the move that deserves attention. In the game, they played this move. So rook c6, d takes c6, queen c6, queen d8, and the bishop is hanging. Bishop b4 move would work too. This bishop a5 controls the c7 square. That's why Karpov chose it. Bishop d6. Queen c3 adding more pressure. Rook goes there. White doesn't rush. They control the game, so they played a3. It's not the best move, but this move doesn't make the position worse. There should be bishop b4 played later. King g7, g3, another prophylaxis. Bishop f5, queen c5. So what should happen in the game here is bishop d6 back, the queen moves, Queen d7, and step by step white improves their position and finally plays this move, and after it trades makes this pawn a weakness. This is what could happen, but Kasparov wanted a counterplay. He played h5, and that made his position more vulnerable. He only added weaknesses to his position. Black pieces at the moment are not ready for a counterattack, and instead he'd better just keep maneuvering, improving it, or trying to hold the fortress. Your turn. How to play here? F4 looks interesting. So bishop c7, f4, and queen b6. Oops. Okay, let's start with queen b6. Well, so take, and rook a8. And if rook b7, it's bishop d6. So that bishop b4 doesn't work. To b7, so in this position. Rook a7. Rook c7 is a must then. Now you have to retreat, and I retreat. If you retreat that way, then okay, let me see what I can do. Let's discuss it. In this position, I don't know if I can already do this, and if you take there, I can take there. And with rooks on the board, in case of this trade, black can hold the draw. Maybe there is f4, and which moment we should try f4? In this moment, no, in this moment it's a blunder. So after bishop c5. This move, rook c3, no, there is no f4. And earlier there was no possibility because bishop d4 was a check. No, queen b6 doesn't work. Okay, so what else we have? Rook b6. Here f4. Okay, but let's see if rook b6 works. Rook b6, queen c8. Then queen takes, rook a6. Check. Maybe. If queen e8 maybe is a move. Okay, let's talk about f4. It definitely looks more interesting at least. So bishop d6, queen d4. Maybe queen d4. Well, again, then what? a3 is vulnerable or not? No, because then rook c7 or e5. Is there e5? Can you take? I doubt. Yeah, rook c8 maybe is too optimistic. So queen d4. Okay, let's continue with it. Take. And now a bishop move. But, well, now with this, I want to attack this. So queen here, then this is the move. Yeah, there is no c7. So In which position? E6. Okay. King h7. So this is also a problem. Okay, fine. Yeah, f4 creates problems. But in the game it was played bishop c7, and it's just an easier way to win. Because if bishop c7, yes, I remember. That was just a win of a pawn, and then f6 falls, and d5 becomes a pass pawn. That's why they didn't take, they played this move. But if so, the bishop is on that diagonal, and d6 is coming. So queen d7, rook here. So the control over the c6 square, in fact, allowed white to double their major pieces and invade c7. Queen d8, and finally d6. And the game ended really quickly. G5, d7. The rook moves. Bishop moves. Bishop f5, rook b7. To not hang the rook. This is a Zugzwang already. So, for example, bishop d6, what else to suggest? The pieces cannot really move. I mean, yes, it's possible to move, but... okay, we'll see. So, bishop d6, for example, queen d5. Queen e8 and bishop a5 with this move. If, let's say, they make a rook move, for example, it can be this. Then, I think we can win with that move. Bishop a5, queen e7. The king moves, and d8. And the next move is queen h7 mate. And there is no perpetual check. Oh, actually, there is a perpetual check. No, there is no. Yeah, there is no perpetual check because well, queen... Okay, so if we continue doing checks, at a certain moment, the queen retreats back. I don't want to give up the other queen, because queen e2, queen takes, and then rook takes there. So we are down a few pawns. So that's why I want to use this queen. So queen d4, queen d3, queen d2, any of these moves. Queen d3 is a cross check, by the way. Because if they take this queen now, it's queen h7 mate. Okay, fine. So, well, this is what happened in the game. Bishop a5 and then d8. It's over. Fine, let's do a quick summary. Well, in this game, between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov, rook e8 was played to defend the pawn on e7. Karpov occupied the c file, queen b7, and then he played d5 to get the control over the c6 square. He wanted to occupy c6 either with his knight or his rook. After that, he traded the knights and managed to occupy it with the rook. Now, the rook on c6 is poisoned. Capturing it means the position is completely lost. After queen d8, bishop f8, it's bishop h6 with a checkmate. And if queen c7, then just queen d7 and bishop b4, threatening to win a pawn on e7 and then promote the passed pawn. That's why instead it was played bishop a5, and then step by step white improved their position. So queen d4, f6, that created a weakness. Bishop a5, all that was played in order to place the queen to the c file and force the rook to move away, because trading means this is a pass pawn and black is almost losing, if not losing. So rook e8, some preparation, which wasn't required, and finally the key move to drive this bishop away from the diagonal and be able to occupy c7 with a rook and attack e7, which finally happened due to this pin. white was able to play d6, and then after g5, instead of just capturing, he pushed, attacking the rook moved, and white took advantage of the pawn on d7. Bishop d2, bishop e5, the rook moves, and the next move was bishop a5 in order to promote the pawn and win material. Also, queen d6, it takes d6, and then d8 queen works. Oh no, it doesn't work so well. Let's first play this, and then win exchange, and then the game. Fine. So the key idea was to get the c6 square available and occupy it with a rook. This is the moment which I think Garry Kasparov missed, and because of that, Karpov won the game. Okay, fine. Do you have any questions for today? No, it's usually 1 hour and 30 minutes. Today we did it a little longer than I expected. So usually we do like 1:15 or 1:30. Fine. So if there are no questions, then thank you for joining. I hope you can come to our next workshop on Sunday. So thank you for coming, and see you next Sunday.